APTN Investigates continues now with Rob Smith's look at how prevention, not child apprehensions, can make a huge difference in the lives of First Nations families.
I'm not a utopian thinker. I think at some stage some of our kids will be in child welfare care, but not at the huge rates they are right now.
In British Columbia, of the 9,000 kids in care, 51% are Aboriginal. In Alberta, it's 64%, trending upwards to 70%. In 2009, close to 2,500 kids from reserves in Manitoba were in care.
These kids get removed from their families. They get put into strangers' homes. Well, imagine if you were traumatized and you were 5 years old and you never knew when you would go home or see any of your family again. That's foster care.
Blackstock's understanding comes from 10 years of being a social worker in northern British Columbia. She admits she's been part of the problem. After university, she had her pick of jobs, probation officer or social worker. She chose social work. At the tender age of 21, she was given the authority to remove children from their families. Her regrets are profound.
I know that I owe apologies to children and families that I've worked with over the years. I really wish, if I had my life to live over again, that I would have been smart enough at 21 to say I have no business doing this work until I know a lot more.
It was during one of her last removals that she realized the system is broken.
I remember I had just done a removal and there were two little girls in the back seat. I looked in my rear view mirror and I saw two scared little girls, and I couldn't even reach behind me while I was driving to try and comfort them. And I knew that I was driving them to a home where I only knew where they'd stay there for the one night. One of those last minute, late in an evening removals. And I thought, what am I doing? Why is this happening? There's got to be a better option than this.
And it's a ridiculous plan to place children in care and traumatize them for a long period of time when they don't need to be there.
In British Columbia, a couple of years ago, the Gwasala-Dinukta people were in crisis. 60 kids, 10% of the population from this tiny village on the northern tip of Vancouver Island, were in care. Dean Wilson has family ties in the village. As a former social worker, he was able to advise the community. He says most of the removals were due to substance abuse. But when baby JC was taken just hours after her birth, the community had had enough.
That's part of the legacy of colonization, is people have felt disempowered. What happened here in Tolkwetty for the Gwasala-Dinukta people with the removal of a particular baby was people became galvanized and said, we can't keep letting this happen.
She'll be there by now.
Kate McPherson was a young mother with a cocaine addiction. She had tested positive for drugs early in her pregnancy. Social workers were on hand when the baby was born.
When they were there, they just took her. The nurse told me that she was checking her sugar, and we didn't get her back. She was 12 hours old.
McPherson insisted she had been clean for months. A second drug test on the day of the child's birth came back negative. Baby and mother were eventually reunited. Chief and council drew up protocols for the ministry social workers to abide by. Before any future removal, there would have to be a meeting involving the parents and the extended family and elders. Government officials agreed.
And so families are confronting the negative behaviors, but they're doing it from a traditional process, a supportive process, one where the plan is to keep children safe, but support the parents to become better parents, and that's very different.
Wilson acknowledges the community was close to losing another one of their children.
That baby would still be in foster care if people hadn't challenged what was going on.
Dotted across the country are success stories. First Nations trying new ways, thinking outside the box. Blackstock argues with proper funding, those successes can be repeated. Blackstock serves up this example, the West Region Child and Family Service in Manitoba. For 20 years, the organization had a more flexible funding arrangement. They were able to invest money in prevention programs.
On-reserve child population is growing. So even just taking all things even, you would expect the numbers of First Nations kids in care to increase just because the child population is increasing. But with the flexibility that they were able to get through their block funding arrangement with INAC, they were able to hold the number of children in care steady, even though the population of children in the community went up substantially.
Blackstock believes that template for success can be found in this 2005 report, optimistically entitled One Day, We Are Coming to the Light of Day. The report estimated the total cost for reforms that included a higher emphasis on prevention programs was close to $110 million. It's just inconceivable to her the federal government refused to jump on it.
We spent 10 years as First Nations Child and Family Service agencies and around the table with INAC, developing not one but two expert-based solutions with them. And they walked away from both at a time when they were running $22 billion in surplus budget. Doing the right thing for First Nations children back then when we released the One Day report would have been 0.5% of that surplus budget. They could have blown the other 99.5% on other things, and they could have still done the right thing for First Nations kids. I can't understand it unless I go to places of questioning the very morality of the people in government.
Do you?
Sometimes I find myself wondering about that. You know, Rob, I go and what I see in the communities are little kids with loads of potential. And I see families really loving them and wanting to do the right thing for them. But they're denied the opportunity to be successful as a family. Why would the government do that?
When the Feds shelved the One Day report, the appeal to the Human Rights Commission was next, but the Feds counter with what is called an enhanced funding approach, beginning in 2007 with $98 million given to Alberta, a year later $105 million to Saskatchewan. When Manitoba signed on in 2010 for $177 million, the Feds estimated 68% of First Nations kids were reached by this new model. But in 2008, this new approach was already roundly criticized by the Auditor General. When she investigated the department, Sheila Fraser was troubled by what she found.
Preventative services weren't being funded and still aren't being funded in many provinces. So the only way to get a child services was to take them into care, which I think most Canadians would agree is not the approach that should be taken. You really need to work with families.
But that's something the Feds already knew. An internal evaluation in 2007, officials were made aware of the funding inequity. The evaluation read, correct the weakness in the First Nations Child and Family Services Program funding formula, which encourages out-of-home placements for children when least disruptive measures would be more appropriate.
We're not hiding from the problems in what I'm saying about the federal government. There is substance misuse challenges in our communities that we do need to address. There is unbelievable poverty and spiritual and emotional trauma resulting from residential schools. What I'm asking for from the Government of Canada is not to fix those problems for us, because I think we want the opportunity to do that in our own communities, along with our kids. What I want is the same opportunity to do that as other Canadians already enjoy.
There remains the possibility that the Human Rights Tribunal case will be dismissed, but Blackstock remains undaunted.
All I see is that goal at the end. And if that means that we have to shift gears from the tribunal into something else, then let it come. But I will never give up, because this is simply too important. And I'm not going to give over any power to Canada about worrying about whether we're going to win or not. I just honestly feel, with all the grassroots support that we have, the kids are going to win. It's just a question of when and how embarrassed the Government of Canada wants to be when that judgment comes down.
Blackstock's anger at the government is born from her passion to see 27,000 kids have the chance for a better life. As she puts it, the state makes a bad parent, and hopefully in another generation, a Prime Minister will not have to get up yet again to apologize for the treatment of Aboriginal children today.
Last March, lawyers acting for APTN and other media organizations petitioned to have cameras present when the Human Rights Tribunal heard the discrimination complaint against the Department of Indian Affairs. 2 months later, the new tribunal chair, Sharice Chatalia, ruled that no cameras would be allowed. But APTN National News will be following the hearings very closely once they resume. We want your feedback on this story. You can reach us via email at investigates@aptn.ca. Check out our website at www.aptn.ca/investigates or call our toll-free line at 1-866-796-0269. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Next week, we return with another edition of APTN in Focus. I'm Cheryl McKenzie. Good night.